So my name is Tommy Alderman. I am, along with my wife, a part of AldermanFarms from Brookhaven, Mississippi. You almost can't get there from here. It's about 3.5 hours on a good day. I don't know if we have a YouTube channel with about 16,000 subscribers. You know, if you know who I am, it's probably because of that. In a former life, it seems like a very, very long time ago, I spent 20 years in law enforcement, most of it in Louisiana, some of it in Mississippi, and that's one of my favorite photos. We made us an Oreo cookie, and by the way, I hated that. I shaved my head twice. I don't know why, because the first time should have taught me. It was unbelievable. It's kind of counterintuitive, but my head has never been so hot as it was when I completely shaved all the hair off. You know, and all I can think is that the pores closed up. While I was in law enforcement in Louisiana, I was a charter member of the state of Louisiana's critical incident stress debriefing team. And what we did, we were trained to go in to law enforcement agencies when there had been some type of major traumatic event involving law enforcement, whether it was an officer involved shooting or could have been in any number of things. And we went in to help them process what they had been through, help them understand what to expect out of their bodies and minds and emotions over the coming days and weeks, and so forth and so on. So that training ended up being very valuable to me after, on December the 9th, 2016, that's a 140-pound Anatolian Shepherd dog named Duke. He was my Anatolian Shepherd dog. We had him for approximately 15 months. That's how old he was when the event that I'm going to describe took place. And I don't know whether this is funny, but it certainly was prophetic. I took that photo of him when he was a little puppy, and I made that little poster and put it up on Facebook. You know, ha ha ha, beware of dog eventually. Well, that was true in my life. I needed to beware of this dog eventually. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details of why that is or what happened, but if you want to read all the details of what happened to me on December the 9th, 2016, when my 140-pound Anatolian Shepherd tried to kill me, you can find those details at AldermanFarms.net/blog. I haven't written anything since then, no particular reason. So you can just go to the blog page, and it's the first one there where it says Tommy survives vicious dog attack. I'll just say this though. The attack itself that day was my fault. We made mistakes in raising him. We missed indications of trouble brewing. He had flashed aggression a handful of times and then would apologize immediately. You know what I mean by that? You ever have a dog apologize? So because of his apology postures, we discounted it, right? We love our critters, and we're like, you know, mistake number one, we made him a pet. Anatolian Shepherds are not meant to be pets, and they're very autonomous. So the attack that took place that day, the initiation of the attack, was based on mistakes I made. But he was relentless, and he absolutely was going to kill me if he wasn't stopped. The following slide contains 4 graphic images of my face and head following treatment. So if you don't want to see that, I'll give you a minute to turn away. You know, it's not like, I mean, it's pretty graphic, but this is following treatment. So nobody's turning away. So are we ready?
Go for it.
So this is what happened to me as a result of that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The right side of my nose was down here. It was nearly gone. I thought my right ear was gone. In fact, I told my wife as we were loading up to go meet the ambulance, tell Corey to go find my ear. What a thing to have to for a 19-year-old boy to hear, you know. I had to go find it, but it wasn't gone. It just, I thought it was. So, and that's all teeth did that, you know. And to this, all three of these, here, here, and here, not this one, but 1, 2, 3, were through and through. I mean, all the way through. So I kept asking the doctors, how many stitches, how many stitches? There's bragging rights. I got to know, you know, because my oldest boy had the family record before me. And they just kept saying, Mr. Alderman, there's no way that we can tell you. Let me go ahead and change that. That's just a reward for having to sit through those images. I thought you'd let you see a little happy pig tail there. But anyway, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, they just, it was like spools of stitching thread. And in some places in my face, it was like 4 layers deep. I mean, they would go way down in there and do a stitch and then come out and more, you know. So, well, I thought I was going to die. I'm thankful for my police training because I knew, I mean, I was thinking tactically. I did not panic. I wasn't even afraid until very near the end. I almost entered the realm of despair. I'm thankful that the Lord didn't allow me to get to despair, because when you get to despair, you give up. And had I got to despair, I probably would have let go of his collar and said, get it over with. I didn't get there. But most of the time I was thinking very tactically because of my law enforcement training. I knew I had to control his collar. And so my face doesn't look like it, but I was actually pretty successful. He did all of that on about 3 licks, 3 or 4 bites.
Oh, wow.
The rest of the time I was able to keep him off of me. So just before I reached despair, I looked up and saw 60 yards away my wife and my 19-year-old son coming. And even though my eyesight's not great, I could see my Glock in his hand from 60 yards away. And so I knew I was going to be rescued, or felt like I could, or felt like I was. So he's running to me, I'm fighting the dog, and he gets about 10 or 15 feet away, probably about the distance between me and you. And I laugh about this and think, why didn't I let him get 3 feet away? But as he got about, I said, shoot the dog now. And immediately I heard, bam, bam, bam. And here's where I was telling you, the point I want to come back to you earlier about your kids are listening to you. When I was in law enforcement and my kids were little, I would tell them, now look, if we're ever out in McDonald's, because look, I was a cop with 4 kids. If we went out to eat, it was McDonald's.
Right.
And the dollar menu, you know.
Right.
And I told them, I said, if you ever hear Daddy say, get under the table, obey me immediately without question. And I was saying that mainly for my youngest daughter, Carly Ann, because she'd be the one to say, get under the table, why? You know.
Right.
My 19-year-old son, when I told him, shoot him now,
He reacted.
remembered that.
Wow.
And he shot him immediately. I'm telling you, there was almost no perceptible time difference between the word now escaping my mouth and me hearing that first shot. What's crazy is, talking to Corey, there was some thought that went through his head between now and him shooting. You know what the thought was?
What?
I'm about to shoot my own father in the leg, but that's not going to kill him, and this dog will. Bam. He also remembered, this was not something that I structurally taught my kids, but they picked it up from me in my commentary on news stories. When a police officer maybe, and I hesitate to tell this story anymore because with the current environment of police violence, but you know, not all police shootings are bad. You know, there are times when they're perfectly justified. So imagine now I'm describing a justified police shooting, but in which the officers had to shoot multiple times. And inevitably somebody says, why did they shoot so many times? And and the reason is, law enforcement is trained that you shoot until the threat is neutralized.
Exactly.
He remembered that. So he shot the dog immediately. The dog recoiled back off of me and came right back. So he shot again, and the dog fell off of me the second time, but he wasn't
dead.
He wasn't dead. So he shot him the third time. He hit him all 3 times. So anyway, it's not the. This is not. I said I wasn't going to give all these details. I'm giving too many for time's sake. But I was airlifted to the hospital. They in Jackson, Mississippi. By the way, that cost $47,983.27.
Wow.
I had good insurance and the money, the stuff. It cost me nothing out of pocket because our YouTube viewers actually gave money, you know, and it was amazing experience. But so I'm up there in the emergency room, and you know the swarm of doctors comes in to do triage and all that, and I got an intern on this side, an intern on this side, and they're both going down my legs, even though, and that's what they do if you've ever been in a hospital, even if the injuries are obvious, they check everything. And the guy over here said, oh, the dog got you down here, huh? And I said, no, it was, trust me, I know where he was. It was all up here. And he said, oh, well, there's some holes in your pants. And I said, oh, well, I said, you know, he tore my shirt, so it might have been a back paw or something like that. He pulled my pants leg up, nothing, so it went on. Well, I didn't even spend the night in the hospital. They sent me home. I was there for hours, sent me home, and they wanted me to sleep in my lounge chair for about a week. So I went in the bathroom and to get into, you know, some more comfortable stuff. I still had on the jeans and everything. And I took my blue jeans off and I threw them up on the counter. Went on in there, spent the whole night. Sometime the next day, I went into the bathroom, and as I'm walking out, I look over there and I see my blue jeans. And I look at that, and the holes that the doctor was talking about were right there in front of my face. And I knew immediately when I saw them, the dog didn't do that.
The bullet did.
The bullet did.
I was going to ask if he shot you.
He didn't shoot me.
He shot you.
Wow.
Oops, I hit too many. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, wow.
We found all 3 of the rounds, and that one's got denim in it.
Wow. It went, wow.
Yeah, so, you know, my
Nice.
pants were bunched up, and it went through a fold in the pants.
Wow.
So, anyway, go back and read everything I've written on AldermanFarms.net/blog, and you can get a full understanding of everything that happened that day, because the whole thing was really amazing. So in order to get to where I want to get today, to talk about how to survive the aftermath of a traumatic event or a critical incident or a high stress event, we need to talk for just a minute about cumulative stress versus critical incident stress, or the stress that results from a high stress event. Cumulative stress is kind of what it sounds like. It's stress that builds up or accumulates over time. We all have things in our lives, normal everyday living, work-related stress, relationship issues, frustrating situations, major life changes, new job, moving, getting married, getting divorced, having a baby. Not necessarily bad things. Cause stress in our lives, and it builds up over time, and the effects of cumulative stress are made worse by lack of exercise, poor eating habits, poor sleep habits. Here's some tips for handling cumulative stress: regular exercise, regular honest communication with your spouse, your parents, your peers, healthy eating, plenty of water, healthy amount of sleep, and rest. You can't avoid cumulative stress. It happens unless you live in a hole under a rock. And then the stress of living in a hole under a rock is going to create cumulative stress, right? So that's cumulative stress, everyday stress that accumulates on you. So what is a critical incident? Also in more recent days referred to now as a high stress event. Here is your highfalutin definition. A critical incident or a high stress event can be defined as any event that has a stressful impact sufficient enough to overwhelm the usually effective coping skills of an individual or group. Hurricane Katrina was a critical incident.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was an event that had such a stressful impact that people who normally could cope with a lesser impact were overwhelmed by it. So that's a critical incident. So They are abrupt, powerful events that fall outside the range of ordinary human experiences. It's not an ordinary human experience to have a 140-pound dog eating your face. So that attack was a critical incident. These events can have strong emotional impact even on the most experienced among us. I spent 20 years in law enforcement. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've been in some bad situations, but yet it impacted me. So even though I'm very experienced. Now this is very important. Failure to effectively deal with cumulative stress will worsen the effects of critical incident stress. Does that make sense? So if you're living a stressful life and you're not getting good exercise, you're not eating healthy, you're not drinking a lot of water, and a huge hairy thing happens to you, you're likely to have a far worse, more difficult time handling that critical incident than you would have had you been more effectively handling your cumulative stress. I hope that makes sense. Now I've got a couple of scientific slides that I'm not going to take the time to talk about. I never take the time to talk about it, but I keep them in here because what you need to know is this is science. This is not magic. Your brain functions differently in the midst of a high stress event. And so the things that this will make more sense to you why I'm pointing this out as we get further in this presentation and I start talking about what happens to you. In fact, it'll make more sense to you right now. High stress event amnesia or critical incident stress amnesia is a real thing. During a high stress event, the brain changes the way it records events, okay? So if somebody goes to a big thing and you say what happened, they say, I don't remember, they're not lying to you, chances are. They may very well not remember because the brain changes the way it records events. Seemingly important facts are totally left out because the brain perceives them to be unimportant to survival. All that matters to the brain in the midst of a critical incident is staying alive. Staying alive, staying alive. Not everybody's old enough to remember that, but get that little reference. Here's another scientific brain thing that can happen that somebody's not making this up. But it's a confabulation is a disturbance of memory defined as the production of fabricated, distorted, or misinterpreted memories about oneself or the world without the conscious intention to deceive. Accounts given immediately following a critical incident might very well differ from accounts given after some time has passed. And that cannot be helped. And if you ever see stories of some kind of bad thing happening and somebody involved in the middle of it, they tell one story right after it happened and then a week later they tell a different story. It's not necessary, I'm not saying nobody lies, but it's not necessarily because they're being deceptive. It could be because of this confabulation. The brain is trying to process what happened. The brain will sometimes, my favorite example of this was there was a case where an officer was involved in a shootout inside of a pharmacy. And so imagine the pharmacy desk. You know how it's elevated kind of? And somehow the bad guy had been back there, but somehow the officer got back there and the bad guy was out in the store. And so there's this desk, this raised thing, counter, I keep saying desk, counter, and then there's space behind the counter, and then there's a big glass window. Everybody kind of know what I'm talking about? So the officer is somehow, he's walking, the glass is here for him, the counter is here for him, the rest of the store is out there from his perspective. And he's walking and he's looking and he suddenly turns and he sees the bad guy come through an aisle and raise his weapon and fire at the officer. And the officer remembers, as he described the events later, he said, I ducked, heard the gunshot, heard the glass in the behind me shatter and felt the glass hitting me on my back. Only to find out later the guy did not fire, the glass did not break, and it did not fall. But was he lying? No, because he found out when he got up that the glass was still there and all that, and he just later says, y'all, let me tell you what I experienced in the middle of all this. I heard the shot, you know. I heard the glass. I felt the glass. He had a tactile response on the back of his neck, and he could feel the glass hitting him. But it did not happen. Confabulation. This is what happened. It's a scientific thing. Your brain changes during high stress events, okay? So, examples of critical incidents, also referred to as high stress events. Katrina, major act of nature. I've actually got that listed here, but serious accidents, machinery, automobile, other, animal attacks. Hello. I verify that one personally. Criminal assaults, burglary even, where there's no criminal assault. Come in and you're violated, you feel violated. Sudden death of a loved one, especially if it's in your presence. The guy that I work with in my full-time job just lost his mother recently, and he has a 13-year-old nephew that found her, and she had fallen. She had health issues, but she had fallen in the bathtub or in the bathroom and struck her head. So this 13-year-old boy walks in and finds his grandmother naked and deceased with blood on the floor. Raise your hand if you think that was a critical incident for that young
I
man.
came in and found my husband in the floor, 7 years old.
There you go. That's a traumatic event. That's a traumatic event. Natural disasters. But listen, this is very important that I want you to understand. Anything else, this is not a conclusive list. Anything else that meets our definition of a critical incident, which is any event that has a stressful impact sufficient enough to overwhelm the usually effective coping skills of an individual or group. Critical incidents are abrupt, powerful events that fall outside the range of ordinary human experiences for the person experiencing it. Another story to illustrate that it can be anything was that a police officer, I don't remember where, but this man committed suicide as a result of a traumatic event. You know what it was? He saw a Pomeranian get hit by a car. Now that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Until you learn that his 2-year-old was killed by a car running into the road chasing a Pomeranian.
Oh.
That changes it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you never know. You never know what, so I try to tell, especially when I'm training police officers, especially police officers, but humans do it too, just humans in general. We have a tendency to judge other people's reactions and think, well, I wouldn't react. They're reacting wrongly or whatever based on how we think we would. But you just never know. It sounds utterly ridiculous for a man to have such an emotional trauma over seeing a Pomeranian hit by a car that he would take his own life. That, by itself, that sounds utterly ridiculous. But then when you learn that the reason is because it brought back the worst memory of his life and made it real again, and he couldn't take it. Who's old enough to remember baby Jessica? The little girl in the well.
Yeah.
30 years ago, maybe, something like that?
Yeah.
I remember.
Y'all know I think it was this guy. Remember the famous photo of the fireman who had her once they got her out? I'm pretty sure it was this guy. Look me up. But it was somebody there when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. That guy killed himself. Simply because he hadn't processed everything. And the baby Jessica thing has a happy ending, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a terrible ending that causes, but it all came back. All of that came back when the Oklahoma City bombing took place, even though this guy's, a half a state away. But anyway, so people react differently. The question is why? 1/3 of people who go through a traumatic event experience little to no trauma. My 19-year-old son who had to shoot the dog, he had no reaction at all. And I aggravated him for weeks. Are you okay? Are you okay? You need to talk about it. He's like, Dad, you know. So, but he was in that 1/3 in that 1/3 there. I started to say top 1/3, but I don't want to rank these. Those are up there randomly. A third experienced little or no trauma. A third experienced moderate trauma, and 1/3 experienced severe trauma. Look at that last line in that column. Any of the three is normal. You're normal if you experience no trauma. You're normal if you experience moderate trauma, and you're normal if you experience severe trauma. Why do people differ? Well, personal coping styles, prior exposure to high stress events. Okay, the Oklahoma City bombing, the guy who with the baby. That prior exposure to high stress events made the Oklahoma City thing too overwhelming for him. The officer who killed himself after the Pomeranian was hit, that's why. Prior exposure to high stress events. The degree of intensity of loss, additional learned information after, and just the balance of life. Really, you could put in parentheses there, cumulative stress. Because if a person has a whole ton of cumulative stress on them, chances are they're going to have a more difficult time following a traumatic event. So, we talked earlier about mitigating cumulative stress with exercise and things like that. So here's how you mitigate critical incident stress. Training. I've got that bolded up there because that's what we're doing right now today. You are being trained. And you're going to be equipped before we leave here. And I'm happy with my time so far. Then there's a process called diffusing, which needs to take place within a few hours of an event. Where somebody comes in and just reminds you of some things that you're going to learn today. Then there's a debriefing, which should take place within days if necessary. There's one-on-one crisis intervention if necessary. There's family crisis intervention if necessary. Follow-up and referral if necessary. I'm going to tell you how to get this PDF. So don't worry about taking notes unless you're just like overwhelmed with something utterly profound that comes out of my mouth.
In there I'd like to share with my baby.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you how to get the whole thing. Training is key. Knowledge is power. Knowing what to expect can go a long way toward mitigating the effects of critical incident stress. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explain how that happens because of the power of the battle dump. Anybody ever heard of the term battle dump? If you're not connected to military or law enforcement, probably not. So let me tell you what the battle dump is. One of the things that can happen to your body in the midst of a high stress event is that your bowels can release involuntarily. So SWAT teams and special tactical units in the military know this. And so before going out to execute a high-risk warrant or some kind of high-risk thing, they'll take what they call a battle dump. Everybody will go to the bathroom and sometimes even take laxatives before in an attempt to clear their bowels so that they don't have to deal with, the bowels releasing in the middle of a thing. So I want you to imagine a scenario. Let's say this guy right here is an old salty veteran who knows all about the battle dump. But he forgot, or he was late, or whatever, and he didn't get a chance to go take his battle dump. And then let's say this is a rookie who missed that day of training. And he doesn't know that his bowels may release in a high-risk situation. He doesn't know about the battle dump, so he doesn't go and do it. So then they go out on the raid or whatever, and sure enough, both men's bowels release. So their reactions to that are going to be completely different because one had knowledge, one does not. The salty old veteran is going to say, crap, sorry guys, right? Big joke. That's not how the rookie's going to respond who didn't know that. He's going to not say a word. He's going to try his best to slip out before somebody smells the evidence. And he's going to begin asking himself a question. Does anybody know what that question is or care to take a guess?
Why did I just move here?
Am I cut out for this?
Say it again.
Should I be here?
Should I be here?
Am I cut out for
Am I cut out for this? Why did that happen? Those are good answers, and I'm going to roll them up into what I was wanting you to say. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? Those are all correct answers, and I'm filing them away for future use. He's going to start asking himself, what's wrong with me? He's not going to run up to the other guy and say, hey guys, guess what just happened to me? I just crapped all over myself. What's up with that? No, he don't want anybody to know because he thinks he's the only person on the planet who that would have happened to. You see the power of that? So my personal example was 2 or 3 days after my attack. I'm sitting in my lounge chair, middle of the day, was not thinking about the dog. I did have intrusive, for a while. I saw his face right here. But at this point, it's for me I want you to understand, I was not thinking about the attack. And out of the blue, totally irrationally, tied to nothing, I was overwhelmed with terror. I was overwhelmed with a sudden, completely irrational terror, and it gripped me for about 30 seconds. I was literally balled up in my lounge chair, just gutting it out. And then 30 seconds or a minute went by, and it kind of released, and I went, huh. My reaction was, huh. And I called Patty, my wife, and I said, let me tell you what just happened. Why was I able to react like that? Because I knew, because I had been equipped with knowledge that, hey, be on the lookout for all kind of weird stuff to go on in your head and all that. And so when it happened, I was fine. I didn't like it, but I was fine. What if I hadn't known that? What question may I very well have asked myself? What's wrong with me? And I might not have talked to Patty. I know better. I know to talk to my wife, but I'm saying, as a man, I might have just not said anything, Maybe that won't happen again, but secretly asking myself, what's wrong with me? Knowledge is power. Remember this? Everybody reacts differently. Never judge. I forgot I had this slide in there. I mentioned it earlier, so I'm glad I do. Never judge another's reaction by how you think you might react. And also, if you want to write anything down, write this down. Because these are the 2 most important things of this whole deal. And if you forget everything else I said, but remember this, it will help you in the event of a traumatic incident in your life. Any reaction, including no reaction, is a normal reaction. And 2, you are a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal event. It's the event that is abnormal, not you. So, common reactions to critical incident stress or high event stress. Let's look at some cognitive or mental reactions. The ones I have bolded are not because those are more important or anything. Those are the ones that I experienced most pronouncedly. I got a degree in English. That ain't a word. But that's what I'm going to go with it. Most pronouncedly. They were the most pronounced symptoms, okay? Blaming someone, confusion, nightmares. I had to sleep with the bathroom light on. After a week or so, I made it back to the bed, and I couldn't go to sleep in the dark, And I told Patty, I said, "Is it okay if I sleep with the bathroom light on?" She said, "Sure." I'm not embarrassed to share that with you. Why? Because any reaction, including no reaction, is a normal reaction. That's not my normal. I love the dark. I love to sleep in total blackness. During that period, I needed the reassurance of the light to be able to go to sleep, for a week or 2. Eventually, I was able to turn the lights back out. Suspiciousness, poor attention. I won't read through all of these because you can have these in the PDF that's free that you can download. Poor concentration. I suffered with that. Now, my wife might tell you, you always suffer with that, but it was more pronounced following this event. Intrusive images. I would see the dog. I would see those teeth right here. Just out of the middle of nothing. Boom, I'd see it, And intrusive is the key word. It makes sense if you see them, if you're thinking about it, if you're rehashing it. But the images would just come out of nowhere. I'd be having a talk about sourdough bread, and there he is. Perfectly normal. How about some emotional reactions? Feeling of failure, second guessing yourself, fear. I had a sense of irrational fear for a little while. Apprehension, feeling overwhelmed, anger at people, loved ones, anger at the bad guy if it was involving another human. I never did feel angry at the dog, but that's another story. Mark of Cain. Anybody? What does that mean? Anybody know what that means? Mark of Cain. Everybody's looking at me. Everybody's looking at me. So I felt that, like when I finally ventured out into public and went to Walmart, I was like, I just felt like everybody was looking at me, even when they weren't. How about behavioral reactions? Can't get relaxed. Change in speech patterns. Isn't that weird? But it's true. You can actually have changes in speech patterns. Eating changes. Now, it's important when I talk about eating changes, alcohol consumption changes, things like that. Understand this: you could eat less, you could eat more. Doesn't matter. It's a change. If it changes, just be aware of it. You may not be able to eat. Maybe all you want to do is eat. So look for changes. Crying spells, inability to sleep and rest, that was me. Hyper alert to your environment, that was me. So when I went to Walmart, I had two things happen. I felt everybody was looking at me, and I could almost feel my eyes wide as I was scanning. I couldn't explain it for the longest time, and then I remembered this, and I said that's what it was. I was subconsciously scanning the environment for threats. I was just hyper alert. Startle reflex intensified. I'm easily startled, but so that didn't really you can't really intensify mine. But somebody who's not easily startled could be for a period of time. Social changes: withdrawal, isolation, antisocial acts, changes in societal activity or social activity, anger at everyone, arrogance. Spiritual changes: you get angry at God, begin questioning God, questioning His authority, questioning your own religious or spiritual status. Increase or decrease in religious activity. It may push you toward becoming more spiritual, or it may cause you to become less spiritual. Many of these things have a season. They only become a problem if 6 months from now you're still drinking, more than you should, or eating 500 Reese's peanut butter cups before bedtime. A period of time it should start tapering down. Family changes, irritability, you get kind of snappy. I don't have that one bolded. I confess I probably should have it bolded. I don't know. I had to ask Patty if I was snappy or snippy. Agitated, easily angered, over under reaction to discipline needs. So my kids were, kind of, my baby boy was 19 at the time. We do have a grandson, but of course I'm not going to discipline my 6-year-old grandson, right? Do what you want. But anyway, if you've got kids, young kids, and it's something to be aware of. You could see changes in your behavior in disciplinary situations. Lack of desire to engage in family activity. Questioning career choice. All of this material is adapted from training for law enforcement. Well, I left that in there, even though that's, didn't you say earlier about the guy feel like I'm not cut out for this? The guy, a lot of times police officers will, maybe I shouldn't be a police officer, but I left that in there because that doesn't apply to just police officers. I mean, trauma can happen to anybody, anywhere, and it could cause you to question your career choice. Others' reactions to you, they could second guess. You need to be aware that other people may react these ways to you. You could find them second guessing your reactions. I'll put my whole story on Facebook within a couple of days of it happening. I'm a teacher at heart, and I've exposed all the mistakes I made in raising that dog. And 90%, it was an overwhelming social media response to me. 90% of it was uplifting, encouraging, consoling. There was a 10% of people that if they'd have been within striking distance, I would have broken their neck. Just because of the hatefulness, And how stupid can you be? You know, you should have never had one of those dogs. I'm like, well, hello, you think I don't know that now? You know, but anyway, so be aware of that. Judgmental statements, questioning your career choice, wrong expectations from TV and background, and anyway, news media reactions if they're involved. People afraid to be around it because they don't know what to say. All right, so after a critical incident, what now? This ought to look familiar. Handling critical incident stress. We saw this exact same slide in how to handle or help handle cumulative stress. Exercise, regular honest communication, healthy eating, plenty of water, healthy amount of sleep and rest. It helps. It helps. My doctors wanted me to not exercise for a few days, but then they wanted me to get out, move around. You know, because things start pulsing through your body when you're moving around, and those are good things. Specific helpful ideas. Strenuous exercise within 48 hours, if that's medically and practically possible. Structure your life and be active. Maintain as normal a schedule as possible. Spend time with others. Don't isolate yourself. Make no life changes for 6 months. If you're involved in a critical incident, don't sell your house, and then don't make the decision to sell your house the next day. Unless you're already planning to do it. You know what I'm saying? Don't wake up the day after the event and say, call a real estate agent and say, you know, just wait. Give it 6 months. But do make as many daily regular decisions as possible. And then look at that big one at the bottom. Don't keep secrets. So I got a few minutes. I want to make sure I get this story in. Don't keep secrets. Let me tell you how this is important. So after we discovered that Corey had shot through my pants leg and didn't hit me, I was talking to Corey wasn't at home, so he didn't know. And I got some advice that sounded good at the time from a law enforcement friend in Alabama, but since then I learned it was bad advice. But it sounded good. He told me I wouldn't tell him if I were you, because it may cause him to hesitate the next time. Well, at the time it sounded reasonable, so I didn't tell him. So some weeks later, the guy that's in charge of training, critical incident stress training in Mississippi, wanted to eat lunch with me. He had heard what had happened. And I ate lunch with him, and I was telling him that on my way, this was like February, so the attack happened in December, this was like February. And I told him that while I was driving up into Jackson to meet him, that I had seen the dog again, you know, just his face right here, boom, and I was kind of like, as I'm driving, it didn't cause me to wreck or anything, and he looked at me and he said, that shouldn't be happening still. And he said, what have you not told? And I thought that was a weird thing to say. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're holding on to some piece of information. I said, no, I'm not. And he had me try to dig and dig and dig. And in the meantime, he told me a story about an officer he had helped that had been involved in a shooting where the officer was carrying one of those big tactical SWAT shields with like a little plexiglass window. And it's probably not plexiglass, but, you know, and the shield was getting hit with bullets right in front of his face, you know. So you can imagine that could be traumatic. So he talked to the guy, and anyway, he gets a call from the guy some months later, and he said, hey man, what are you doing? He said, I'm in a ditch. The guy said, I'm in a ditch. He said, what do you mean you're in a ditch? He said, I mean, I'm in a ditch. I'm riding down the road, and I see like a 300-pound bullet coming at the windshield of my car, and I swerved to miss it and ran off in the ditch. And so Tim, the guy that was talking to me, he knew about this science that says that holding on to secrets, you know, can cause that kind of stuff to not go away. And so he started drilling him. What have you not told anybody? And he said, nothing. You know, I can't think of anything. And he kept after him, and the guy finally said, oh my word, there is something. And he told him what it was, and his flashback stopped. So he said, Tommy, what have you not told anybody? And I said, nothing. You know, it's kind of the same as the officer. And he kept pushing, and I kept digging and digging and digging, and I couldn't think of anything. And then I said this. I said, I've told Patty everything. And when I said Patty's name, it dawned on me, but I haven't told Corey everything. And so I made the decision, sitting at the dinner table, I've got to tell Corey. And from the moment, get this, from the moment I made the decision to tell Corey, I haven't had a flashback since. Even before I actually told him. And of course, the funny part of the story is, we get Corey in that night, and I said, Corey, I need to tell you something. And I started leading up to it, and he starts grinning. And I said, what are you grinning about? And he said, I shot through your pants leg. He knew the whole time. Because either Patty or me had left our cell phones laying on the bar open, and there was a text message in it between me and her about that, and he saw it. So here I was holding on to a secret for no reason. So don't keep secrets. Also consider, should you watch news events, read papers or social media about the event if your event is covered? Maybe ask someone who knows you well, like your spouse, parent, very close friend. Hey, do you think I should stay away from this or whatever? Keep a notepad with you to log down events as memory recurs. My telling of the story, in fact, that blog on AldermanFarms.net changed over a period of months as I began to remember things that I had forgotten or that my brain had skipped, and also as my memory corrected itself. And as Patty and Corey and I got together and helped each other's memory become more cohesive and correct. So, if somebody you love experiences a traumatic event, here's some helpful tips for you. Be a good listener. Spend time with the person. Don't let them isolate themselves. Offer your listening ear. You don't have to talk a lot. Help them with everyday household tasks. Give them some private time. It kind of seems counterintuitive with spend time with the involved person, but you can find the balance if you're thoughtful about it. Don't take their anger personally. Hurting people bite. People who are hurt bite.
Yes, we do.
Just like animals. An animal back in the corner who's hurt and everything, they bite. So do people. Remember that. Don't take it personally. Tell them you're sorry this event had to occur and that you want to understand and help. The best way to help is to encourage communication, exercise, and proper eating and ample rest. Here's some helpful coping tips. Return to the balance of life for support. Talk to your spouse, your pastor, your close friend. Remember, you have permission to feel. You don't have to keep those floating balls pushed underwater. Let them out. Exercise. This helps chemically. It actually does. Just like shooting, baseball, and most everything else, there are the basics you must return to. Use the incident to grow, to get better as a person, and to help others who are in need. Here's what you can expect long term. A possible preoccupation with the event. See, for months and months and months, it's all I could think about. Not all I could think about, but I think it would qualify not with an obsession, but below that, a preoccupation. You can expect everybody's opinion. Lawsuits maybe, depending on the nature of your event. Bad press coverage. Special interest groups, meetings, rallies, the mark of Cain, feeling like everybody's looking at you. Stupid statements, mostly intended as jokes. And then finally, a return to normalcy. You will get normal. You will return to normalcy again. Main things to remember are these three. Everybody reacts differently. Don't judge folks based on how you think they should react. Any reaction, including no reaction, is a normal reaction. And finally, you are a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal event. It is the event that is abnormal, not you. For more information, traumastrikes.org will take you to a page at AldermanFarms.net, and you can purchase for $0 our free downloadable PDF. You'll also find a video on that page that we did. The event happened on what day was it? I don't remember. But within a couple of days, we did a live. It happened on a Friday, and Sunday evening we did a live YouTube video talking about it. So that the link to that video is on that page, and some other little things. But you can also reach me at I didn't put my name up there like that, but Tommy at traumastrikes.org. if you have any questions or anything, but I would encourage you, you notice on that previous slide at the bottom, I said, please share it, download that PDF, send it. Remember this for me. When you see bad things happening around this country, and you know somebody who lives over there, or, wherever it happens or whatever, send them this PDF. Send it to them. We were on vacation and ran into somebody who had been involved on the periphery of the Las Vegas massacre thing. And we were able to put this information into their hands, so I don't want to nickel out of any of it. I just want the information out there so that when people are faced with this kind of stuff, they can know that they're not crazy, and they can help, they can process and come back to normalcy. Any questions? Well, thank you for your attention. I hope that was helpful to you.